You know what's funny? We spend months, sometimes years, preparing for pregnancy. We read every book, take every class, build the perfect nursery, and then the baby arrives, and everything we prepared for, that part is actually over. What comes next is the part nobody really prepares you for. Hi, I'm Julia Siegel. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I've spent years working with pregnant women and new mothers in my practice. But the reason I created Beyond Expecting has less to do with my credentials and everything to do with my own experience as a new mother, which rocked my world in ways that I couldn't have imagined. It's my mission to bridge this gap in our culture. I'd like to share some of the most challenging blind spots new mothers face along this journey and how to thrive despite them. Because when you prepare for the postpartum transition, and not just the birth, it can make the difference between a shaky start and a blissful, solid foundation for your family. This is the transformation I facilitate in my Beyond Expecting Postpartum Passage program, which is kind of like giving you the key to a house you don't even know you're going to need to enter. I'd love to share with you this presentation I just gave to a group of new mothers. I hope you enjoy it and get a lot out of it. When my son was born, I thought I was prepared. I had the training, the knowledge, the birth plan. The birth itself was long and painful and didn't go quite according to plan. I ended up in hospital even though I'd been planning to give birth at home. But like all births, it came and went before I knew it. But when I came back home, I remember standing there holding this tiny person, feeling simultaneously more love than I had ever felt in my life, and at the same time more lost, overwhelmed, and alone than ever before, even though my partner was right there. Nobody had told me it would feel like this. Not the books, not the prenatal classes, not my colleagues, not even my own mother. I kept waiting for the moment when I would feel like I knew what I was doing, when things would click into place, when I would feel like myself again. That moment took a lot longer than I expected, and the path to it was nothing like anything I'd ever been taught. Here's what I've come to believe after years of doing this work. Our culture is completely obsessed with pregnancy and birth. I get it. It's dramatic, it's visible, it's celebrated, but birth is only the beginning. What comes after, the postpartum period, the first weeks and months of motherhood, is one of the most profound and transformative experiences of a woman's life. Yet it is rarely talked about, and as a result, we are sending mothers into it almost completely unprepared. We're not told about what comes after birth, not because it's impossible to prepare for, but because our culture stopped passing down the knowledge that would allow mothers to thrive through the postpartum passage. Beyond Expecting and our growing community of mothers provide this crucial knowledge and support. Today, I want to give you a real sense of what the postpartum journey actually looks like for both you and your baby. The biology, the psychology, the practical stuff, and the deeper stuff that doesn't get talked about enough, and how Beyond Expecting supports you with each type of challenge. At the end, I'll tell you exactly how you can join us if you want to go deeper. Before I walk you through the course, I want to share 3 things with you that I believe are quietly undermining even the most prepared, most conscientious mothers I know. The first one I discovered the hard way, through my own postpartum experience. When my son was born, I did what I suspect you might be planning to do. I had my birth doula, I had my lactation consultant, I had a naturopathic colleague on speed dial, and a carefully curated list of podcasts and practitioners I trusted. I thought that was preparation. What I didn't realize was that I had suffocated myself with information. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. When you are postpartum and your hormones have just undergone the most dramatic shift of your life, when your body is still healing, when you haven't slept well in weeks, when you're falling in love with a person who cannot tell you what they need, your nervous system is already working at full capacity. Because I didn't know any better, I ended up feeding competing voices into my already overloaded system. One expert said one thing and another said something different about feeding and then about sleep. My doula had a perspective that didn't quite match my lactation consultant's. And instead of feeling held by all this expertise, I felt more anxious, more vigilant, more like I was constantly scanning for the right answer and never quite finding it. What I eventually understood is that your nervous system cannot rest inside a dozen competing voices. The anxiety wasn't a sign that I needed more information, but that information itself had become the problem because it didn't give me clarity. Beyond expecting is not more content to add to your list. Instead, it serves as the filter that lets your brain stop scanning and start mothering. The second thing I want to address is something most mothers in this space would never say out loud, but almost all of them feel. You are educated. You have probably done some therapy or inner work. You understand attachment theory. You know what matrescence means. You have researched this more than most people research buying a house. And somewhere underneath all of that is a quiet belief that goes something like, I shouldn't need to be taught something this natural. If I were more relaxed, more intuitive, more ready, the knowledge would just come to me. I want to introduce you to Allison. Allison was a student of mine who had done everything right. She had read Janet Lansbury and she understood intellectually that babies need to cry. She knew about oxytocin and the fourth trimester and skin-to-skin contact. And yet when her son arrived and cried for hours at a time, she still felt like she was failing. In her own words, I thought that if I played by all the rules, he would not cry much. I gave everything I could possibly give, but he still screamed his face off at times. I finally realized there was no fix. Allison wasn't lacking a maternal instinct. She was experiencing something that happens to almost every mother in modern Western culture. She had the primal love and fierce drive to protect her newborn, but she had no blueprint to operate within. Here's what the science tells us. Maternal instinct gives you the drive to protect and care for your baby, but motherhood is also a skill, one that for most of human history was transmitted by being surrounded by a village of women who had done it before you. You learned it by watching, by being held, by being shown. That transmission was broken long before you arrived on the scene. Don't worry, your maternal instinct is there, but it still needs a blueprint to operate within. Beyond Expecting provides this blueprint. The third thing that can undermine the most well-prepared mom is the one that generates the most quiet resentment in the postpartum period, and it almost always comes as a surprise. Picture this. It's day 4 after the birth. Someone who loves you, your mother-in-law, a close friend, arrives at your door. They are genuinely excited. They genuinely want to help. They come in, put the kettle on, pick up your baby, and hold her while you sit nearby. And somehow you're not even sure how it happened, but you find yourself getting up to make the tea, tidying the kitchen, asking if they want something to eat. They mean well, they love you, but they have no idea about the reality you're facing. This is the pattern I see again and again. The people in your life want to show up, but they're running on standard Western scripts for what visiting a new mother looks like. Nobody taught them what a functional 4th trimester actually requires. Nobody told them that what you need is not a visitor, but someone who holds down the fort so you can have the freedom to recover and fall in love with your baby. The truth is that a functional village in today's day and age doesn't form on its own. The people around you need a blueprint just as much as you do. And one of the things I help you with is how to give them the blueprint they need to help you in advance. Now let me walk you through what's inside the course, because everything I've just shared points directly to what we cover together. Across 7 modules, we'll explore the transition into motherhood from every angle, understanding the profound identity shift of matrescence in entering the motherhood matrix, cultivating confidence and resilience in trust and transformation, supporting your well-being through the baby steps of maternal health and nutrition, learning to respond to your baby's needs in crying on mama's shoulder, navigating feeding with clarity and confidence in milking the wisdom on breastfeeding, making sense of infant sleep in Sleep Like a Baby, and discovering how to create meaningful support in today's world through Ancient Wisdom, Modern Village. Together, these lessons provide a grounded, compassionate roadmap for the early months of motherhood. Let's dive into it. The very first thing I want new and expecting mothers to understand is this. The postpartum period is not a time of recovering your normal former self. It's a portal to a completely different version of you. I call it the heroine's journey, and it's fundamentally different from the story our culture tells about transformation. The hero's journey, the one our culture celebrates, is about going it alone, slaying the dragon, and coming back with a new badge. Pregnancy and birth actually follow something like the hero's journey. You enter the great unknown, you go through the ordeal of labor, you receive the revelation of your baby. But the heroine's journey, the one that starts after birth, is different in one essential way. It's not about going it alone, but about being together with others and learning to receive from them. In the film The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy always felt responsible for her 4 companions, but when push came to shove, the others worked together to save her. And that beautiful synergy is what brought the story to its happy ending. When we let in a parent or trust our partner with the baby, or simply stop resisting the help that's there, that's when we discover that our real strength lies not only in what's within us, but in those we allow to lean in. There's a word for what you go through when you become a mother. Scientists call it matrescence. Like adolescence, it's an irreversible neurological and psychological shift. It is not a switch that flips as soon as you give birth, but a gradual transformation that can take months or sometimes years. Think of the caterpillar that turns into goo in the cocoon. No longer a caterpillar, but not yet a butterfly. That undefined in-between state is the postpartum period. That's why so many women feel like they don't know who they are anymore. Traditional cultures understood this. In virtually every culture with intact postpartum traditions, new mothers were held at the center of a social cocoon, fed, supported, protected from ordinary demands, until they were ready to spread their wings and be celebrated in their new identity. We have largely lost those traditions, which is a significant part of why so many mothers are shocked. Every single new mother I've spoken to has told me she was not prepared for the sheer magnitude of what it actually feels like to become a mother. Now, alongside all of this transformation comes something our culture is very uncomfortable with: uncertainty. The postpartum period is genuinely unpredictable. And rather than helping us sit with that, our culture rushes to fill the void with expert systems, rigid schedules, parenting camps that promise certainty if you just follow the rules. But subscribing to a fixed system to escape the discomfort of not knowing is actually what gets in the way of developing your own maternal intuition. Intuition doesn't arrive fully formed. It emerges from experience, from observation, from learning to trust what you notice about your baby rather than what the books say babies do in general. Which brings me to the developmental paradigm, the foundational mindset of the entire postpartum passage. A developmental lens starts from one simple truth. From the moment of birth, your baby is in perpetual evolution, and so are you. Change is the only constant. When you understand that, the energy you were spending trying to reconcile what the books say with the reality of your unique, ever-changing baby gets freed up for something far more valuable: actual presence, simple observation, and constant learning. Module 1 gives you the right map and your proper mindset, which together make everything else in your postpartum passage flow better. Now let me tell you something about mommy brain that I wish someone had told me before my son arrived. Mommy brain may seem like a deficit, but it's actually an upgrade. I know that sounds hard to believe when you're standing in the kitchen, phone in hand, with absolutely no memory of why you walked in there. But here's what's actually happening inside you that's so crucial to realize. After your baby is born, your brain is redirecting its resources. The areas responsible for social attunement, emotional sensitivity, threat detection, and reading your baby's subtlest cues, all of these are being enhanced in real time. You become acutely aware of your baby's breathing, their sounds, the tiny shifts in their expression. Here's the science that totally amazed me when I first read it. Researchers can tell with virtual certainty whether a woman has ever been pregnant just by scanning her brain. Not her body, but her brain. Motherhood literally changes how your mind works. Studies even show that new mothers have generally increased neuroplasticity, which is the brain's capacity to form new patterns, rewire itself, and learn things it never could before. That's the brain you're getting. What our culture misses is that this shift isn't a regression to a less competent you. It's a transition from the masculine, driven, analytical, outwardly productive mode into the feminine mode, which is present, receptive, and attuned to the moment. Most of us have been running on the first mode for decades, but your baby needs your presence rather than your productivity. My student Allison put it beautifully when her baby was 7 weeks old. She said, had we not talked about mommy brain, I would not have been able to identify what it was, and I would have been much more stressed out by it. I could really feel how my brain went into a different place than it had been before. I got really mushy. Things were so hard to grasp. I was losing things and I couldn't remember people's names. It was crazy. When you understand what's happening, you stop fighting it. And when you stop fighting it, you can actually use your brain more effectively. The hormone at the center of all this transformation is oxytocin, the hormone of love, trust, and connection. Oxytocin peaks right after birth and stays elevated for months. It's also the hormone that makes breastfeeding possible. A surge of oxytocin is what triggers the letdown of milk. Without it, your baby won't be able to receive any of the milk you make. Here's the piece that changes everything. Oxytocin is directly suppressed by stress, fear, isolation, cold, and sleep deprivation, which is unfortunately a near perfect description of the unplanned postpartum experience in modern Western culture. What we now know from the research is that high oxytocin doesn't just make you feel good, it helps you tolerate monotony, sleep more deeply, build trust with your baby, and even regulate your baby's nervous system. Infants who are touched, held, and responded to with warmth develop a lifelong reduced reactivity to stress. Oxytocin receptor levels are set in early life. Your oxytocin literally shapes their hormones. So oxytocin isn't just something that's nice to have, it is the hormonal key to a healthy mother and child, and it's produced when we feel good. In Module 2, we go deep into exactly what raises oxytocin and what tanks it, including the specific body-based tools you can use at home for fun. Belly binding, warm oil rubs, acupressure, heat therapy, the specific foods that directly stimulate its release. Small practical things that most mothers have never been told about, but that traditional cultures have relied on for centuries. There's one more piece to this module that I want to name directly because it's the piece that nobody talks about in the parenting books. Attachment isn't about the baby gear you buy, or about co-sleeping versus a crib, breastfeeding versus formula, baby wearing versus a stroller. Those things in themselves have almost no bearing on whether your baby develops a secure attachment to you. What determines attachment is the state you're in when you're parenting. The research is clear. Secure attachment develops when a mother can receive her baby's signal, a cry, a fuss, a gaze, without avoiding it and shutting down on the one hand, or becoming anxious and overwhelmed by it on the other. This doesn't need to happen perfectly and every time, but most of the time. Even one consistently responsive caregiver is enough to provide this sort of security for a child. In fact, you knowing yourself, your nervous system, your patterns, your own attachment history, is more predictive of your baby's future physical health and psychological thriving than almost anything in your baby's environment and upbringing. Because that self-awareness helps us stay present despite our inner narrative. And this sort of healthy sense of self is exactly what Module 2 is designed to help you develop. Here's something that most postpartum advice gets completely backwards. After your baby is born, every question, every conversation, every check-in, every concerned relative is about the baby. Is she eating? Is she sleeping? Is she gaining weight? And you're invisible. But here's what the research and every traditional postpartum culture on the planet has understood for centuries. There is no real separation between nourishing yourself and nourishing your baby. And just as we said, your state of being is the single most powerful influence on your infant's early development. So Module 3 is unapologetically about you. In both Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine, a woman who has just given birth is considered to be in an energetically depleted, cold state. Her digestive fire is low. This isn't just a metaphor, but a physiological reality. As a new mother, your digestive system is vulnerable, which is why so many new mothers experience bloating, constipation, low appetite, and difficulty tolerating foods they normally handle just fine. A chronically weak digestive system becomes a slow drain on every other system in your body: your sleep, your mood, your skin, and even your breast milk supply. The fix isn't complicated. Warm, cooked, moist foods, broths, soups, root vegetables roasted in healthy oil, healthy fats used liberally, spices like fennel, ginger, turmeric, and cardamom that literally increase digestive fire and soothe both you and your baby's gut. During this time, cold foods are best avoided. In Module 3, we explore not only which foods to eat, but also when, because your diet in the first 10 days looks quite different from weeks 3 through 6 and different again from months 2 and 3. Here's something I see constantly in my practice, and it frustrates me every time. A new mother comes in, she is exhausted, losing hair, struggling with her mood, barely sleeping even when the baby sleeps. She's been told by her doctor that her blood work is normal, that this is just what the postpartum looks like. But normal and optimal are not the same thing, and the postpartum body has specific measurable needs that standard medical care almost never screens for. In this module, we go over the key areas to investigate during your first postpartum year, what to test, when to test it, and how to interpret what you find. Because understanding what's actually happening in your body is the difference between struggling and genuinely recovering from your pregnancy and labor. The women who feel best in the first year aren't the ones who push through. They're the ones who pay attention, catch and address issues early on, and give their body what it needs to function. You deserve that level of care, and this module gives you the map. I'd like to touch on something that sounds almost embarrassingly simple, and yet is one of the biggest practical challenges of early motherhood. You can know everything about postpartum nutrition. You can have a freezer full of soup and a spice rack stocked with fennel and turmeric, and still find yourself at 2 a.m. dying of hunger, holding a baby who is crying for the umpteenth time that day. This is why we close the module by discussing the practicalities of feeding yourself well, meal trains, freezer prep, and most importantly, the surprisingly powerful act of simply sitting down to eat while your baby sleeps, instead of scrolling or collapsing. The one non-negotiable I'll leave you with right now is prioritize getting in a warm, real meal, eaten calmly and sitting down. This single habit done consistently will do more for your recovery than any supplement on the market. For some mothers, dealing with their baby's crying is one of the most difficult parts of new motherhood. Let me introduce you to Rachel, a mom of a 2-month-old boy. It's 6 p.m. Her son has been crying for over an hour. His diaper is clean. He's fed 4 times in the last hour. His face is red. She doesn't know what else to do. Holding him doesn't help. Putting him down doesn't help. She's out of ideas. Perhaps you're already feeling some of Rachel's panic. This is a natural reaction, but I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with the situation, not with Rachel and not with her baby. What's happening is one of the most predictable and misunderstood features of early infancy. What's happening is a normal developmental stage known as the purple crying period. The acronym PURPLE stands for peak of crying. It builds toward the 2nd month, then eases by month 3 to 5. Unexpected, it comes and goes without obvious cause. It's resistant to soothing. It often comes with a pain-like face. It's long-lasting for hours every day, and it happens especially in the evening. Most of the time, this cluster of behaviors is normal, developmentally expected, and most importantly, it is not a reflection of your mothering. That last point deserves a moment because this is where so many mothers suffer unnecessarily. We live in a culture of cause and effect. We expect a direct connection between effort and outcome. You do the right things, you get the right results. And when your baby cries and doesn't stop, that same logic says, I must be doing something wrong. My former student Allison was following attachment parenting to the letter and still felt like a failure every time her baby cried. The problem, as you can probably guess by now, wasn't her parenting, but her expectations. Your baby's crying is not a feedback loop on your performance. It reflects many things, including what's happening in their gut, what their nervous system is processing right now, and where they are at in their development. Once you internalize this realization, you can be fully present for your baby's crying instead of unraveling. Which brings us to the practical, what actually helps. In this module, we go deep into the body-based logic of infant soothing, and the first thing that surprises most parents is that soothing is mostly stimulation rather than calming or stillness. The womb was noisy, warm, pressured, and constantly in motion. A quiet, flat, still environment is actually disorienting to a newborn. Tummy down holds over the shoulder, across the lap, or chest to chest activate comfort responses that lying on the back simply cannot. Movement and gentle jiggling, shushing loud enough to match the crying, white noise, outdoor walks, non-nutritive sucking, the skin contact all work because they recreate the environment your baby spent their first 9 months inside. I'll also give you the knowledge to feel confident about positioning, when to worry, when not to, and how the back to sleep, tummy to play guideline actually works in practice. Tummy time starts from birth, and it's not just developmental. It's one of the most effective soothing techniques you have. But it's true that sometimes crying points to something that needs to be addressed, which is why we cover colic and reflux next. I'll tell you the story of Layla, whose daughter cried almost continuously for months before anyone identified what was actually wrong. She told me afterward, if someone had just told me what normal difficult looks like, I would have known sooner. You will know. We go through what GERD looks like versus normal spit up, what colic actually is and isn't, and genuinely helpful science-based strategies such as specific probiotics, adjustments to your diet, and herbal support, so that if you find yourself in that territory, you won't just be waiting it out. Module 4 gives you both the mindset and the toolkit to handle your baby's crying. The crying will still happen, but you won't be lost inside it. Let me ask you something. Before your baby arrived, what were you told about breastfeeding? You probably heard it might hurt at first. You probably heard about the sleep deprivation from round-the-clock feeds. Maybe someone told you about the importance of a good latch or feeding on demand. You picked up a little here, a little there. Here's what I've come to believe after years of working with new mothers. That little bit of knowledge often ends up standing between a mother and her baby. She thinks harder, she applies the rules she learned, and in doing so, she misses the simple cues her baby is giving her. And then she goes down the rabbit hole of worry. Because the thing that's actually hardest about breastfeeding is not the pain, and it's not the fatigue. It's the uncertainty. It's having a hungry baby in your hands and not being sure whether all your effort is actually sustaining them. That uncertainty, more than anything else, is why many mothers stop breastfeeding much earlier than they want or intend. And like most things, it comes down to knowledge and mindset. In this module, I walk you through the breastfeeding journey stage by stage, so you know what to expect before you're in the middle of it. We start with the first 3 days, which most people think of as a waiting period before the milk comes in. But there's so much happening in those first hours that most parents don't know about. The golden hour after birth is one of the most important windows you have, and most families spend it trying textbook positions, worrying over whether breastfeeding is successful, and receiving very little reassurance that what they're seeing is normal. The reality is that what a 10-hour-old baby looks like at the breast is nothing like what a 10-day-old baby looks like. And if you don't know that, it's very easy to conclude something is wrong even when everything is exactly right. I also teach you how to hand express colostrum in those first days, something I feel every new mother should know how to do, and very few are taught. Hand expressing in the first hour after birth is one of the most powerful things you can do to establish your supply, and it's genuinely easy once you know how. From there, we move into establishing breastfeeding past the first weeks, when the supply is building and feeding rhythms are emerging. I cover why following baby's cues matters far more than any timer or schedule and address common myths and misconceptions. And then there's positioning, which is where I think we've really failed new mothers as a culture. The upright, seated position most women are taught in hospital turns out to be the hardest position for both mother and baby. There is strong evidence that semi-reclined, laid-back breastfeeding positions lead to half the rate of nipple pain, cracking, engorgement, and mastitis. Babies have many inborn reflexes that help them breastfeed, and most of those are activated specifically when baby is chest down against the mother's body. When we simply create the right environment for those instincts to work, breastfeeding becomes something we allow, not something we perform. We'll close this module with the practical problem-solving piece. We cover 3 most common challenges: latch issues, milk supply concerns, and bottle feeding. You'll learn why most perceived supply problems aren't actually supply problems, how laid-back positioning resolves the majority of latch difficulties before they become a crisis, and how to bottle feed if needed in a way that actually supports breastfeeding. This information will be available to you whenever you need it. The support is always there. As a mother who went through 6 very difficult weeks of breastfeeding struggles my first time around, this module is very personal for me. The information in here is what I wish I had but didn't. It would have been completely different in my experience and saved me and my son weeks of suffering. Let me tell you about a trap that catches almost every new parent. All new mothers want their baby to sleep like a baby. It usually starts out really well. Your newborn is easy to settle and sleeps like a dream for long stretches. You find your rhythm. You think, I've got this. My baby is just a good sleeper. And then, somewhere around 4 months, everything changes. More awakings, resistance at bedtime. You start Googling in the middle of the night. And because you gave yourself credit for the easy stretch, you now take the blame for the hard one. That's the trap, and it has nothing to do with anything you did wrong. What's actually happening is a developmental leap, a neurological progression. At 4 months, your baby's brain restructures how it enters sleep, shifting from the dreamy newborn pattern to something closer to adult sleep. It's not a regression, it's a maturation, and the parents who handle it best are the ones who know in advance that it's coming. That's what Module 6 gives you, the science to stop catastrophizing every change and start reading your baby's sleep for what it actually is. Here's the counterintuitive basic principle. Sleep begets sleep. This means that the more tired your baby is, the harder sleep becomes. An overtired baby is flooded with stress hormones, wired and tired, which is why your parents' advice to just tire them out backfires so reliably in young babies. What you need to look for instead is the wake window, the sweet spot when sleep pressure has built to its optimal point between not tired enough and overtired. At 1 month, that window is approximately 45 minutes, and it expands gradually by about 15 minutes per month. It also tends to be shorter in the mornings and longer in the afternoons. Alongside wake windows, you will learn to read your baby's sleep cues. The yawning, eye rubbing, the staring, the sudden social withdrawal, before the fussing starts. Every baby has their own signature. My son's was a shift from being present and engaged to just going somewhere else with his eyes. No book told me that. I learned it from watching him. You'll also learn about sleep cycles, why babies wake between them, and what determines whether they'll link into the next one and fall back asleep or wake up fully. That's the kind of knowledge this module gives, along with the reassurance that every baby will get there eventually. It takes time. Then there are sleep associations, which are environmental cues that help make sleep easier. The single most effective practice is simple. If possible, put your baby down to sleep in the place where they'll be sleeping. When a baby falls asleep in your arms and wakes up in a crib, it's a bit disorienting. Imagine falling asleep in your bed and waking up on the kitchen floor. One mother I worked with made just this change, nursing until drowsy and then settling her son in his crib. And overnight, her baby went from waking every hour to waking only twice every night. We'll also address the myths that generate so much unnecessary suffering. The idea that all babies should sleep through the night by 6 months, or that your parenting approach is the primary determinant of how your baby sleeps. Regardless of what you do, I promise that your baby will eventually sleep through the night. We'll close this module by discussing strategies for coping with your own interrupted sleep. Here we come full circle, back to the idea that it takes a village to raise a child. Virtually every mother I've ever worked with has told me that her biggest challenge was not the feeding, the sleep, or the crying. It was the overwhelming sense of isolation. We are wired for community. We descend from village dwellers who raised children collectively. Long before cities and nuclear families, new mothers were held in a web of women who never left a mother alone to figure it out. Even though many of us rely on hired help, what mothers lack is not just practical support, it's being genuinely witnessed, held, and celebrated. But here's what I've learned, and this took me years to really feel in my bones. Your village doesn't just appear. It's something you grow from the inside out. It starts with your own willingness to be seen. Messy house, leaking breasts, and all. The crappy dinner party that actually happens is worth more than the perfect one you keep putting off. In Module 7, we look at what a real village actually looks like at each stage. The first weeks, when the protective cocoon of those closest to you is what lets you and your baby settle in. And then the gradual opening outward, new friendships, other mothers, the broader community that begins to form around you as you step into it. To close off the course, we look at something deeper, the values and cultural assumptions we've absorbed without realizing it. Those represent the outer reaches of our village. When you know your values and cultural roots, you stop comparing yourself to others and start mothering from a place of genuine strength. At the end of the day, belonging can be something you build around yourself, rather than a place you find out there. A decision to build your village inside and out can start at Beyond Expecting the Postpartum Passage. This is a guided and supported course for women who are pregnant or newly postpartum who want to thrive through this transition, not just practically, but internally. Here's what's included in the program. The foundation is the Beyond Expecting core system, 7 modules, 34 videos, approximately 6 hours of self-paced learning with me. The singular, coherent container that lets your nervous system rest instead of scanning. The blueprint I wish I'd had. This course alone could save you countless hours of frustration and hundreds of dollars in consultant fees. The program also includes live integration circles, group calls with me and a circle of mothers moving through the same journey. Most mothers in this space are already investing in individual support, a few sessions with a postpartum doula, a visit from a lactation consultant, an hour with a therapist. Those are all worthwhile, but they're also expensive, sporadic, and disconnected from each other. The integration circles give you something none of those can, an ongoing, consistent, held space where you bring your real experience week after week with a community of women who understand exactly where you are. That kind of sustained support is genuinely hard to put a price on. And because knowledge without a plan is just more noise, you also get the Postpartum Passage workbook. This is where you design your 4th trimester before your baby arrives. From your support structure to your nourishment plan, this is not about knowing it all, but about knowing yourself and reflecting on your own unique nature, with wise guidance from those who have lived through it. The clarity this gives you before the chaos begins is something no amount of Googling at 3 a.m. can replicate. Finally, because I've found that many women need all the breastfeeding support they can get, I've included lifetime access to Nancy Moorbacher's natural breastfeeding program, which normally costs $97 as a bonus. It is a treasure trove of videos showing how to position your baby naturally for improved breastfeeding comfort and outcomes. When you add it all up, the core learning, the live community, the planning workbook, and the breastfeeding program, you have everything you need in one place, with one coherent voice at a fraction of the cost and effort you'd spend piecing it together on your own. But even if you piece it together eventually, so many mothers look back on those early weeks and months postpartum with longing and regret. They connect the dots looking back on an anxious and sometimes tormenting experience, but eventually realizing what's real does not give you that time back. My wish is for you to have the solidity and comfort of a new mom with a whole troop of experienced, educated, and loving aunties and grandmas surrounding her. This program is for you if you're pregnant and want to prepare for what actually comes after birth, not just the birth itself. It's for you if you're newly postpartum and feel overwhelmed, lost, or like you're somehow failing at something that's supposed to feel natural. It's for you if you're tired of piecing it together from a dozen different sources and want one coherent place to land. And it's for you if you sense, even if you can't quite articulate it yet, that you were not meant to do this alone. If you join today, you could be sitting in the very next circle, bringing your real questions, your real experience, into a real conversation with me and other mothers. That's not something a podcast or a stack of screenshots can give you. And if you're not quite there yet, I completely understand, and I don't want you to leave empty-handed. I've put together a free gift for you, a real starting point, the kind of honest, grounded information I wish every mother had before her baby arrived. That link is also below. Whatever path you're on right now, whether you're not yet pregnant, 10 weeks pregnant, 3 weeks postpartum, or struggling somewhere later along the way, I want you to know this. What you're going through is not a problem to be solved. It's a rite of passage to be lived. And you're not meant to do it alone. Generation upon generation of mothers throughout history have walked in your shoes and navigated the waters of this journey. You are part of something that's both ancient and extraordinary. Take care of yourself, Mama.